Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today we are talking my top lore reveals and takeaways from Archmagos, the latest installment in the Belisarius Cawl story. I think it goes without saying a spoiler warning here for the novel Archmagos by author Guy Hayley. And as always, I really recommend you read the novels for yourself first. However, with that said, let's waste no time and just jump straight in. Okay, so as I was reading Archmagos, anytime I hit something I found particularly interesting from a wider lore standpoint, I made a little note about it. So these points may not be in perhaps the order you may expect here, but they are pretty much the talking points as I encountered them throughout the story. And I'm sure you're all aware, but as a recap, the premise of Archmagos is Belisarius Cawl acquiring the final piece of technology he needs to finally test his Pylon project, a piece of technology he needs to steal from the Necron race, which, long story short, he does. And so, lore takeaway or development number 1, Belisarius is clearly growing increasingly unhappy by what he perceives as a lack of trust from Guilliman. The main point of view in Archmagos is actually from a Historitor Solana, who has been dispatched by Guilliman to observe and record Belisarius' actions here. And in Cawl's very first meeting with her, when she's still mentioning what an honour it is to speak with the Prime Conduit, Cawl immediately says, "An honour to spy on me, you mean?" And he plays it off in his jovial Belisarius manner that he has, but it's clear that he really means it, going on to make a remark about Guilliman not trusting him when he's the one who has given him his precious Primaris. And several times throughout the course of the story, Cawl again makes the point of saying that Solana is a spy. And so while of course Cawl is loyal and doing everything he can to save the Imperium, it is clear he is becoming increasingly frustrated by what he feels is a lack of trust from the Primarch, a theme in this story that certainly isn't there by chance. And in relation to that, lore takeaway number 2 is that Guilliman is angry with Cawl as well, beyond impatient now, at least according to Tetrarch Felix, who in this story is dispatched by the Primarch to oversee Belisarius' test experiment at the Pit of Rorkos. When it's mentioned to Felix that the Primarch must be impatient now if he's sent the Tetrarch here, Felix privately remarks in his own thoughts that Guilliman was beyond impatient the last time that he saw him. In fact, he was angry, and that if Belisarius didn't show up to conduct the test, Felix had been ordered by the Primarch to fetch him, so to speak. And so it's pretty clear the relationship between Cawl and Guilliman is getting a little testy, to say the least, at least beneath the surface. Cawl believing that he has earned more trust, and Guilliman clearly angered by Cawl's actions and lack of communication. And there's only so far these building frustrations can go in a relationship before it goes too far. So it's going to be pretty interesting to see how this continues to develop between the two. It certainly feels like it's building towards a breaking point. Which one of them that's going to be, however, is anybody's guess right now. Lore point number 3. The doubts regarding Guilliman are continuing to spread across the Imperium, and his expansion of Ultramar is a big reason for it. Shown here in a conversation between Tetrarch Felix and the Wolfspear chapter Marine Bjarni. his former friend from the Unnumbered Sons. Bjarni outright says to his friend that no wonder the Lords are suspicious of Guilliman, that the Ultramar expansion looks like empire building. And let's be honest here, he's not wrong. And he goes on to say that Guilliman's great flaw is that he thinks he's right about everything, and that when something is not done how he likes, he seizes control of it himself, which only leads one way, to the throne of terror. And again, this is a conversation between old friends, not a terrified governor or wary High Lord. And so it's pretty impactful, and a good sign of how Guilliman's actions, while done with the best of intent, are causing himself more problems. And it really does highlight the flaws in the Ultramarine Primarch pretty well, making you think. In relation to that, Law Point 4, the Ultramar reconquest is pretty brutal, with executions taking place, with Felix himself having to execute a loyal Imperial governor who wouldn't give over control to Ultramar, an act that sickened Felix and still plays on his mind. And though a brief point, it really showcases the reality of this order by Guilliman, that it absolutely isn't a glorious return to the old, simply clearing out corruption, that it is also forcing control away from loyal Imperial worlds to the throne, forcibly under the banner of Ultramar, even killing perfectly loyal Imperial commanders who refuse it. Honestly, the more you see, the more it makes you think that this isn't going to end well, and the more I'm really beginning to think that Lionel Johnson will see Guilliman up to his old tricks, reigniting those old doubts that he used to have about him. But we'll have that discussion another day. Law point number 5, a small but very interesting one, is that the general in-law narrative regarding Guilliman's plans with Imperium Nihilus have gone from being referred to as rescuing or saving the Dark Imperium to reconquering it, meaning that as far as the people of Imperium Sanctus are concerned, Imperium Nihilus is lost. Maybe not a big difference, but I'm pretty sure it would be hugely disappointing for those still fighting hard across the rift, clinging on to their faith in the Emperor and the Imperium, to know that the other half of the Imperium had already written them off. Thank the Emperor that Guilliman himself refuses to do so. Law point number 6, word of Marneus Calgar being humbled by Guilliman has spread far and wide, with for example the Wolfspear chapter hearing about it. And even Felix doesn't deny completely that Calgar is unhappy, with what the Wolfspear describe as being pissed off, Felix labels as having his pride wounded. It's been an underlying theme since the very first Dark Imperium novel, and I'm pretty intrigued to see where this is all going to go, as it's clear, and now reinforced here, that the Ultramarines chapter master has clear misgivings, or if that's not the right word, then at least doubts within himself. Number 7. When reflecting on his execution of the loyal Imperial governor, the man's dying words to Felix were that he's a puppet made by a monster, and that he doesn't even know who his real master is. And this sticks with Felix, making him contemplate the Primaris and who they ultimately obey, Belisarius Cawl or Rebute Guilliman, and what would happen were Cawl to attempt a claim for power, though of course the Tetrarch himself is adamantly loyal to Guilliman. However, it definitely gives me vibes of a possible Order 66 in the 40k universe, the Primaris turning against the Primarch. It'd never happen, of course, but it was pretty interesting seeing Felix wonder about it. And that Primaris loyalty question still even being a thing. A narrative that simply won't go away. Lore reveal number 8 is that vashtorr the Archithane is not only aware of Belisarius Cawl, but more importantly is seeking to add him to his forge, meaning that vashtorr is going to be a much more prominent figure in the near future for the Archmagos, particularly with his efforts to stabilise the Attilan Gap. So though vashtorr wasn't hugely instrumental within this novel, I think it's definitely a given that he is going to be a big factor in the next one, with Belisarius' attempts to stabilise the Attilan Gap crossing. And on that number 9, Belisarius' test is successful at the Pit of Rorkos, closing the warp rift completely. And so he announces his intent to head for the Attilan Gap immediately at the end of the novel. Meaning again, I'm pretty sure that's going to be what's taking place within the next Belisarius Cawl novel. And finally, number 10. The novel ends with Magos Erementius, who has accompanied Guilliman's Historitor Solana's visit to Cawl, sending a private and secret message to Mars and the Fabricator General, who is named by the way as a Xanandria Valde. Essentially meaning that the Mechanicus has spies within Guilliman's Historitor organisation, and that they're still up to their old self-serving tricks, despite their grovelling apology to the Primarch within the Dawn of Fire series novel The Silent King, regarding their starting of the Necron War and keeping its extent secret. Now, what the contents of this message were, we don't know. However, I think it was safe to assume it was the report of Cawl's project being a success, as well as all his heretical actions therein, now recorded and made into evidence by Historitor Solana. So we'll obviously have a larger conversation about this another day, but it certainly appears the outcome is either going to be 1. That Mars wants to steal Cawl's technology, or 2, that they'd finally be able to brandish him a confirmed heretic, removing him from the board. And honestly, it's most likely probably both, meaning that this could prove to be a big problem for Belisarius in the near future. And honestly, not just for him, because let's be honest here, Guilliman is hugely reliant on the Archmagos. And so that's it. While a fairly straightforward story with Belisarius completing his test project, there was actually some really interesting little lore tidbits and revelations throughout, and a few that are going to be asking some real big questions in the near future. Topics that we are most definitely going to have to discuss more in depth. But as always everyone, what do you think? What do you think of the growing anger and discontent between Belisarius and Guilliman? Is this only natural, or do you think it's going to keep becoming more of a problem? What do you think of the doubts regarding Guilliman's actions continuing to spread across the Imperium? Is he causing himself more headaches with his Ultramar expansion? And is Bjarni right that it is all leading only to the Golden Throne? Does Rabute need his other brothers back to keep his own nature in check, as they all used to do for each other? And are you surprised by the Ultramar expansion having executions of those who refuse to yield, even when it's loyal Imperial governors to the throne? And just what will this secret message to Mars lead to? Will Belisarius be brandished a heretic? Or is it even more malicious than that? As always, leave your thoughts in the comments below. A huge thank you to all my subscribers for your support. It truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.